you grew up with a sense actually of, to call it, I don't know how to say it in other terms, of self-hate, because you're told that you're not beautiful enough, you're told that your hair is not good enough, you're told that your color of skin is not good enough, and you're told as well that your history is not good enough. You don't learn about your people pre-colonization, but you only learn about it, of your continent when it interacted with Europe or the Western world. I'm Chloé Bertrand. I was born and raised in post-apartheid South Africa, and I am currently based in London, in the UK. I am a social entrepreneur, and I work in impact investing. I've always been interested in just understanding inequalities in my community. South Africa is obviously a very unequal society, and so from a very young age I started thinking about what, unknown to me at that time, what policies were and why the government was implementing certain policies and wasn't implementing specific policies to end inequality. Just for a general idea, 25% of youth on the continent are currently not employed in education or training, which is extremely high. And in some economies, like in South Africa, some specific areas, you have as much as 90% of youth unemployment, which when you think about it, is just crazy. These are some of the issues that are extremely frustrating on the continent: is unemployment, lack of training, and also the issue of, people actually gaining skills, getting the qualifications, but them not actually finding the right opportunities. And I think one of the key reasons of that is the lack of information and the lack of knowledge as well, of knowing where to find these opportunities, the lack of network. A lot of roles on the continent still remain to be secured through word of mouth, through nepotism, unfortunately. Afrorama is a knowledge hub of the African continent, and our mission is really to equip youth with the opportunities and skills to help them reach the Sustainable Development Goals, or to use the language of the African Union, to reach the Africa that we want. And my interest in the continent more specifically, I think, is related to just my background of my mother being from Ghana, me growing up in South Africa. Afrorama is actually something that was in my head for a very long time. I've been thinking about doing something related to the negative portrayal of the continent. When you looked at the news on the television, you scrolled through your textbooks, where you spoke to people in different professional environments, that the way in which Africa was portrayed was always through its wounds, for its struggles, but never for its ingenuity, never celebrated for its inventions or its ancient civilizations. Afrorama really started as almost as a protest to stop that. So I started doing research and actually starting to publish it on social media. So I started on Instagram. At the same time as I was developing this, I also developed Afrorama's jobs board, which is called the Africa Jobs Board. And it was also at the time in 2021, I was looking for a job after university related to the African continent and related to the social impact economy, so development. And I was finding it really hard to actually find a website that was centralizing all of this information. And so I just started doing it. And then eventually I also started sharing social impact opportunities that were either based on the continent or related to the continent and destined for people who wanted to help reach the Sustainable Development Goals on the continent. And so now it is a platform. It's actually a community of over 30,000 people who are interested in learning about the continent, but also about contributing to the continent through the impact economy. We really want to be user-centric, data-driven organization. So every year since we've started, we've had surveys to basically understand whether or not we're still fit for purpose, whether or not we're serving our users or our community as best as we can. And we'll also do focus groups as well, or get informal feedback from time to time, which is also really useful. Okay, the biggest challenge, which everyone's going to say, but it is the biggest challenge, is funding. Afrorama has always been built with a lean methodology. We've always tried to be as efficient as possible with funding. So I've self-funded Afrorama as much as I could. And now we're basically at the point where we're ready to scale. We've gotten a few grants to test our pilot, but we are such a small organization that it's actually quite difficult to go for grants that are offered by your traditional donors or foundations, because we don't have a service or product that is big enough for those grants, but we still have a great impact on the ground. But personally, I think one of the challenges that I've been having to navigate is, as you mentioned, having Afrorama as my passion and having to marry it with my other passions, which is also impact investing, which is my day-to-day job. Basically finding the right balance of, spending time on your passion, but also having, unfortunately, the constraints of having a 9-to-5 job. There's some weeks where I spend a lot of weekends working on Afrorama, but fortunately or unfortunately it doesn't really feel like work, because it's something I'm really passionate about. It's something that really gives me energy. So I think for the moment I'm managing to balance. In the long run, I would love to see Afrorama become a more sustainable organization, and actually not necessarily something that I work on the day-to-day, but I'm able to empower youth actually to work on it instead of me. And a lot of times you have these programs that are designed in faraway geographies, not at all on the continent, in rooms, in echo chambers, and don't actually take into account the needs of the people on the ground. Where development needs to change is actually be much more bottom up and have more people on the ground working for, these international organizations, working for these NGOs, because it's actually the people who are on the ground who know their community, who have the connections, and so we should be empowering them directly. A way to change this is to, as I mentioned, have more people on the ground as opposed to, in headquarters, maybe in Europe or the US, but also have more listening sessions. So I think impact is about listening. Surveys, focus group discussions, key informant interviews, just to understand what people are thinking and what they would like to see when it comes to change in their community. Start. Particularly as women, I think we tend to downplay certain things. We tend to, second guess ourselves. But I think the key thing is just to go for it. I wish I had started Afrorama way before I did, but I had all these sort of mental barriers that I was putting myself. Starting doesn't mean starting big. You can start by having a small impact with your surroundings, friends and family, and that can grow into, your community, and then eventually go broader than your community. No idea is unfortunately unique. I think a lot of people have already thought about what you want to do. There's a really big power in collaboration. In our society, I think we work a lot in silos because we just, think that we would go faster if we went by ourselves. But I think there's really big impact in actually working with people. It brings in another perspective. It also brings more reach. Collaboration is actually really key. So the third lesson is make sure that along the way you have a support community. People that will be there for you to use as a soundboard, for you to better understand specific areas that you might not be an expert on, and just people that will support you emotionally, not only with the technical bit. I'm really fortunate to have a technical support community, but also an emotional support community. And that's really, really been a strong foundation for the success of Afrorama. So thank you to them. Trying to understand their position, whether you agree with it or not. Something I do in my everyday life is I actually listen to different types of media, different newspapers, even if I don't agree with what they say, what the stance is of that newspaper, just because I want to understand, okay, what are they actually trying to say? And it's also by understanding the other's perspective that you can counter argument what they're also trying to propose. Empathy is really essential for social impact. Having an impact is about listening. Listening is a means of, being more empathetic, I think. And you need to incorporate that in everything you do when you work in social impact. 2030 is obviously a very big year for development. As soon as we launch our strategy, we'll be actively fundraising. If you are interested in being part of this journey, please follow us on our social media or stay tuned on our website.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.